There's someone in almost every group who talks the least, notices the most, and still somehow feels strangely disconnected from everyone around them. You'd assume that person is shy, or distracted, or just quiet by nature. Research on extremely high IQ suggests something else might be going on entirely, and it rarely looks the way we expect intelligence to look. We picture genius as loud confidence, fast comebacks, someone who clearly knows how smart they are. Most of what the research actually finds doesn't match that picture at all. Some of it looks like the exact opposite. Here are 11 patterns researchers keep finding in people with extremely high IQs, and a few of them might explain something about you that you've never quite had language for. The first is a real preference for solitude. Not dislike of people, just a brain that runs its deepest processing in quiet without competing input. Some research on intelligence and social behavior has found that highly intelligent people report less satisfaction from frequent socializing than people with average IQs do, which sounds almost backwards until you think about it as cost. Every conversation is quietly more expensive for a mind that's analyzing several layers of the room at once. Solitude for that mind is an isolation. It's where the processing gets to finish. The second is less emotional and more mechanical. Highly intelligent people tend to change their minds easily and treat that as a strength rather than a defeat. New evidence shows up, the internal model updates, no bruised ego required. From the outside, this can look flaky, like someone who can't commit to a position. From the inside, it's closer to the opposite of uncertainty. It's an honest, ongoing correction process that most people find much harder to tolerate than they'd like to admit. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. And this is worth sitting with for a second. Researchers looking at intelligence and reported life satisfaction have found that past a certain point, IQ mostly stops predicting happiness at all. The people who could understand the world more clearly weren't necessarily enjoying it more. Some studies even suggest the relationship softens or reverses at the extreme end. Understanding more and feeling better turn out to be two very different things, and the rest of this list starts to make a lot more sense once you hold on to that. Third, a mind that doesn't fully quiet down. Not during rest, not at night, not during the things that are supposed to relax people. Psychologist Kazimierz Dąbrowski, who studied this in gifted individuals, called it psychomotor overexcitability, a restless internal drive to think that doesn't come with a natural off switch. Some neuroscience on intelligence points at something physical underneath this too, richer connectivity between distant brain regions rather than just faster processing in one spot. Worth saying clearly, this isn't every highly intelligent person, and it isn't a malfunction where it does show up. It's closer to a brain doing exactly the job it was built for, at a volume most environments were never designed to quiet down. Fourth, and this one's more behavioral than emotional, highly intelligent people tend to be noticeably harder to fool. Some research suggests that higher cognitive ability can improve the detection of subtle social cues, tone, hesitation, what's being avoided as much as what's being said, even if actually expressing that understanding out loud remains genuinely difficult for a lot of people on this list. It creates a common misread, too. The quiet person watching from the edge of the conversation is usually assumed to have the least to contribute. Often they're the one holding the most complete picture of what's actually happening in the room, whether or not they ever say so. And one of the most revealing traits on this list doesn't show up until a little later. So keep that in the back of your mind. Fifth, they tend to feel things more intensely, not less. There's a persistent assumption that high intelligence comes bundled with emotional distance, the cold, rational thinker, unmoved by anything. Some of the research says close to the opposite. Dąbrowski called this emotional overexcitability, a heightened sensitivity to beauty, injustice, music, other people's pain, that mostly stays invisible because highly intelligent people also tend to be unusually good at not showing it. Sixth, and this one surprises people every time it comes up. Intelligence has been linked, in some studies, to a lower tendency to lie in everyday situations. Some research on lying frequency has found that a small number of people tell a disproportionate share of everyday lies, and that measures of cognitive ability tend to track with less frequent, more effortful dishonesty rather than casual, constant exaggeration. The same tendency shows up in humor, too. Research on humor production has connected sharper verbal intelligence with a specific kind of dry, unconventional wit. Less about performing for a room and more about noticing an absurd connection nobody else caught yet. Here's a trait that confuses highly intelligent people about themselves more than almost anything else on this list. And it's probably the single most counterintuitive one here. 7th, they tend to procrastinate hardest on exactly the work that matters most to them. Small, low-stakes tasks get finished easily. The project that could actually represent what they're capable of sits untouched at the edge of starting, sometimes for months. This isn't laziness. Researchers studying this pattern in high-ability individuals have linked it to something closer to complexity awareness. Before starting something significant, the mind can already see the full scope of what excellent would require, including every way the finished thing might fall short of a standard it can picture with uncomfortable clarity. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research found this pattern especially common among gifted individuals, less a fear of failing and more a fear of the gap between the vision and the actual output. The procrastination isn't an absence of caring about the work. It's usually the presence of too much of it. 8th, boredom lands faster and harder than it does for most people, tied to how quickly novelty gets consumed at a fairly physiological level. Some research on cognitive ability and dopamine response suggests the brain's reward system responds strongly to new challenge and drops off sharply once that challenge is gone. This is part of why some highly intelligent people chase several interests at once, shift direction more than most, or feel oddly unsatisfied in situations that look from the outside completely fine. 9th, intellectual humility, and specifically, being genuinely comfortable saying, "I don't know." This tends to run opposite to what people expect. Since we usually assume more intelligence means more certainty, it connects to something you may already know, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where lower competence often produces higher confidence, simply because the person hasn't gone deep enough to see how complicated the topic really is. Someone who has gone deep enough tends to see the uncertainty clearly. So, "I don't know" stops being hesitation and starts being closer to precision. 10th, many highly intelligent people describe real difficulty finding conversations that go as deep as they need them to. Psychologist Lita Hollingworth, who spent decades studying gifted individuals, called this the problem of stimulus poverty, a mind that struggles to find enough depth in its environment to feel fully met. Not superiority. Closer to a quiet, ongoing kind of loneliness that's easy to mistake for aloofness from the outside. For some highly intelligent people, loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of conversations that feel real. And the 11th, persistent self-doubt, not performative modesty. Genuine, recurring uncertainty about whether their own thinking holds up the way people assume it does. This isn't fragility. It's the same mechanism as the intellectual humility trait, just turned inward. The deeper someone's understanding of a subject, the more clearly they can see everything still outside of it. Psychologist Albert Ellis observed that highly intelligent people often hold their own output to a standard nobody else applies to them, treating any gap between what they did and what they could have done as proof something's wrong, when it usually isn't. Not everyone will recognize themselves in all 11, and that's fine. But the pattern underneath them is worth naming. The quiet one gets read as antisocial. The restless mind gets read as anxious. The self-doubter gets read as unsure instead of accurate. Almost none of it is a flaw. It's a mind processing more than most rooms are built to hold. The strangest thing about intelligence may not be how much someone understands the world. It's how rarely they feel understood by it.